Hello everyone, welcome to 3DDesignAcademy.com, the 13th Q&A session. In this segment, I will attempt to solve various problems or questions that you guys might have in Alias. If you have a question or an area that's not working out, please feel free to send the model to contact@3DDesignAcademy.com. Now in this particular session, a viewer asked me about building the body side of the Pagani Utopia supercar. So this is the car in question. I think the body side is relatively simple. However, there are some tricky areas. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing I'm going to do is, here is the file. So I do have a wheel flat already set up in the images. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to strike some curves. So let's make it into a degree 2 curve like this. I'm just going to strike a curve from here to here. Just move it around. I think I'm just going to do a little bit of rotation, maybe add a tiny little bit of crown like this. I'm just going to go to a top view. Now, one good thing about this one is it does actually have a top view, so I'm going to reference that. And let me just rotate it a little bit like this, and I'm just going to pull it down like that. Of course, give it a little bit of crown. I think that's looking pretty good. And maybe I'll just push it out just a little bit more. Okay, so I think that's good. Okay, so next up, I'm just going to strike a curve like this, and I'm going to build a rail. So it's going to be 1 and 1 like this. And I'm just going to add a little bit of crown on the surface as well. Now, if you look at from the top view, you'll see that there's actually quite a lot of volume there. So I'm just going to use the stretch tool, pick the one on the bottom. I'm just going to push it out like this. Okay. Now that's it. However, actually, let me just make sure that all the settings are good like this. Now, if you notice that there is a sort of an undercut over here, so I should use that as a reference. So I'm just going to strike some curves over here like this. Just going to use the stretch tool over here. Maybe add a little bit of crown, and let's just project and see where that ends up. Okay, so that looks pretty similar, so I guess that's okay. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to, I do need to make the fender, but before that, I'm going to strike some curves so that I know where the intersection should be. So let's do this. I'm just going to strike a curve from here to here. I'm just going to, maybe I need to move it up a little bit, and I'm just going to use the stretch tool over here to snap it over here. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to make a curve for the fender. So I'm just going to pick the CV over here. I'm hoping that I can get the shape in. I think I should be able to. So I'm just going to stretch it over here like this. Now I would prefer, let's do this. I'm just going to extend it just a little bit over here. Actually, you know what? I'm just going to make half. So let's do this. I'm just going to strike it over here, and let's just do something like that. Now, I'm not going to make the front. I'm just concentrating on the body side. So I'm going to make a part of the fender, but I think I'm just going to limit it to half. So I'm just going to strike another curve over here like this, and I'm going to snap it somewhere over here. I think that's pretty good. And so I think the top portion is good. However, I do need to figure out the bottom as well. So let's go ahead and do that over here. Now, I think I'm just going to stretch it a little bit more over here like this, and maybe make it just a little bit flatter like this. And I think that's good. All right, so let's strike some curves over here as well. So I'm just going to line it up over here, do the same thing over here, give it a little bit of volume like this, maybe a little bit more, center pivot, do a rotation like this. I think that's good. Do the same thing on the other side, strike some curves, do a little rotation over here, and do the same thing over here as well. Now, when you're making this body side, one thing that you have to note is if you look at this image over here, you'll see that there's quite a strong crease on the top, but it fades as it goes towards the bottom, which means we might have to change the angle of this one. both the wheel flat, and you just have to make sure that the relationship between the wheel flat and also the bodies or the fender surface is good. So I'll probably strike a curve from here to here and maybe fade it away. Now, one thing that I'm going to I do have to take a note of it is if you see this one over here and the side view, you'll see that there is a little volume here. I am not going to be doing that because this is, well, they are separate panels. I think that's the reason why they're doing that. But I think for this demonstration, I'm just going to keep it simple and I'm just going to make it one slab from the top to the bottom. Okay, so, well, let's go ahead and get, build more surfaces. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I do need to make a fender, so I'm just going to strike a curve from here to here. Oh, actually, before I do that, I do need to project some curves on the body side. So let's do that first. So I'm just going to project this one over here, and I'll probably need to extend this a little bit. Like that. And I think this one also needs to be extended like that. I'm just going to project over here and let's take a look. Okay, so that looks good. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to strike a curve from here to here. Actually, you know what? Before I do that, I don't want... Now, if you just align it from here to here, you'll see that... Oh, actually, it does snap. Okay, so if that's the case, then never mind. Right, so do the same thing on the rear. I'm just going to snap a curve here and here. And let's go ahead and project. So I'm just going to project here. I'm going to project over here like this. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a surface for the fender. So I'm just going to do a freeform blend. It's going to be positioned on both sides. This one I'm going to leave it as edge align, but this one I'm going to say connect ends. And I don't know why modify parameter is set as a default, but I'm going to turn that off. And I'm just going to turn on modify range. Okay, and I'm just going to grab this one like this, and that looks good. Let's take a look. Now, highlight is probably not going to be perfect for this one, but that's okay. This is just a simple demo just to show you guys how to tackle an area like this. One thing that I do need to note is, well, basically this surface, well, like I said, there is a fade of this fender feature as it goes towards the bottom, which means I do need to set up this surface a little bit differently. Now, before I do that though, let's go ahead and set, before I do that, I do need to set up the fender curve over here. So I'm just going to just adjust the curve so that it somewhat meets the shape over here. Just going to bring this down a little bit. I think that's good. And I'm going to do the same thing over here. I'm just going to grab these two CVs over here like this. Just going to move this one over here. I think that's good. Okay. And now let's go ahead and create some fender section over here. So I'm just going to strike a curve over here and here. You can make it flat. You probably could add a little bit of volume too. So maybe I'll just add a tiny bit of crown like this. And I'm going to do the same thing over here as well. So let's go over here like this. It doesn't really need to be at the center of the wheel flat. Just going to add a little of volume there. I think that's good. All right, so that's going to set us up nicely for the fender over here. But before I do that though, I do need to make sure that this one is nice and flat. Now you'll notice that this surface goes over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to extend this curve over here. Now, when you're doing this, you can add a little of volume. I don't know what kind of changes it would make. So let's just take a look at the highlight. I think maybe a little bit of volume is not too bad. However, one thing that I'm going to do is I'm just going to extend it a little bit because I do need to make sure that this is nice and flat. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to extend this out just a little bit over here. And let's just go ahead and strike a curve. I'm just going to make it a little bit bigger so that I can just trim it. I'm just going to strike a curve from here to here so that it's just one flat curve like this. Let's just make sure that it's at the right location, which it isn't right now. So I'm just going to push this a little bit more inboard. And I'm just going to make sure that's like that. I think that's good. And let's go ahead and recreate this. So for this one, here's what I'm going to do. I do need to add a little bit of crown. And let's see. Now, as far as the fender feature, actual fender feature goes, I'm just going to duplicate the curve like this. And let's just go ahead and extend it back just a little bit. And I'm going to use the stretch tool to snap it over here like this. Now, by setting up this curve as just a straight curve, one piece, it does allow me to make sure that this wheel flat is going to flat over here. Now, that said, however, I do need to build this one. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm just going to do a by rail. It's going to be 1, 2 with the rebuild curve over here. And it's going to do 3 on the COS over here. And it doesn't build, that's okay. I'm just going to do a rebuild on both sides. And let's just use the curve segments over here to make sure that it's not extending all the way to the top. Okay, so now this one I can delete, and this is the final surface. Well, I don't know if it's going to be a final surface, but this is the surface that I'm going to be using. And that looks pretty good over there. Now, that said, however, I do need to make sure that this is connected over here. So let's go ahead and use the stretch tool again to snap it over here. And let's use a square to build this section. So it's going to be 1, 2, 3, and 4. And that actually doesn't look that bad. All right, there is a little crease over here. So that'll need to be adjusted. But before I do that, here's what I'm going to do. It is degree 6, which I prefer not to use as much as possible. I prefer to just keep it degree 5. So I'm just going to do an explicit control. Degree 2 over here, degree 5 over here. And, well, actually, I can probably... Oh, okay, so it looks like I can't. All right. Now, as far as the volume goes, I think it's there's a little crease, negative crease over here, like a valley. So I'm going to play around with the boundary blend a little bit, see if I can adjust that. Make it a little bit flatter over here. I would say probably not. Okay, so if that's the case, here's what I can do. I can just make this into a square because I do need to adjust this edge. So what I need to do is, well, basically delete the surface over here. And I'm just going to use a square. So it's going to be 1, 2, 3, and 4 over here like this. And of course, looks like degree, okay, so degree 5 does it. And let's do the same thing over here. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. And looks like this time I need to go the opposite way. All right, so now that's done. What I can do is I can just pull the CV out just a little bit. And I'm going to, well, let's do this. I'm just going to do a transform CV. You can do XYZ and UV. I don't think it really matters. But I'm going to pull the CV out and look at the intersection over here. So it's going to slowly fade like this. Now, if you notice, it does have a little section over here. So what I can do is, well, let me see if adjusting the CV structure a little bit like this helps. Okay, maybe, well, I think usually what I like to do on the fender is I try to make the angle a little bit normal or 90 degrees from the fender out. So let's see if that helps. I think, well, a little bit, not much. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to keep it like this, and I'll probably have to do a little bit of adjustment on the CV structure. And that said, I do think the volume over here increased a little bit too much. So I'm going to try and make it a little bit flatter, see if that helps. I would say that's probably, yeah, I think that's not too bad. Highlighted over here is not too bad either. So I think that's good. All right, so now let's go ahead and redo this wheel flat over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to duplicate this curve again. This one. I'm going to hide it like this. And let's go ahead and just extend it over here. Oh, actually, you know what? I actually need to extend it up to this point. All right, and let's go ahead and do the skin again. So I'm just going to grab skin. And now, if you take a look, we got a nice fade as it goes towards the bottom and disappears nicely. It's on a, well, I do need to trim it, but I think this isn't too bad. Plus, there's going to be a fillet at the end. When you are actually doing this, you should put a fillet on the wheel flat as well. So I think that's a nice fade over there. Okay, so now I think those, well, why is it degree 3? Oh, it's because of the boundary blend. If that's the case, I think I'm going to do some manual adjustments. I think there might be a little bit too much volume over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab some CVs over here and try to make them a little bit flatter. So I'm just going to grab all of these, and UV is the direction that I want to go. Just going to flatten it a little bit like this. I usually like to use boundary blend, but of course it's not available for me, so I'm just going to do this. I think that's a little bit better. I'm going to just grab this one. Now this one, you just want to go halfway, because if you do too much this way, it becomes a peak. So you just want to go halfway somewhere there. I think that should be good. Okay, so now that's done. I think the amount of volume is not too bad, and yeah, I think that's good. Okay, so actually maybe this one has too much volume. So I'm just going to try and push it a little bit inboard like this, and I might have to I'll just make some adjustment there. So let's try that. I'm going to, well, since history is gone, I'm just going to align it like that. And position influence set to max. Blending will be on. I'm going to say 1, 2, 3, 4 like this. Looks like there is a little bit of negative. That's okay. I think I'm just going to play around the CV structure here a little bit. Okay, so now that's done. I'm just going to make sure that it doesn't turn negative over here. So I'm just going to delete the construction history over here. And I'll probably have to pull this out just a little bit. This one like that. I think this one is pretty good there. Now, as far as this goes, you can just play around with this one. Make sure that it's somewhat balanced. So I'm just going to push it in. And that actually gets me very close to tangency, which is not too bad. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with that. Okay, so I think that's a little bit flatter than before. I think that's nice. So now let's go ahead and do the same thing on the rear. So essentially the process is the same. So I'm going to add a little bit of crown maybe over here. And I'm just going to extend it like this. And of course, it does have to be flat. So I'm just going to strike a curve. Actually, let's go ahead and extend this one just a little bit over here. I'm going to strike a curve from somewhere over here to here like this. And maybe angle it just a little bit like that. Okay, that's good. I'm going to hide the curve. I'm just going to use a stretch tool over here. And let's give it a little bit of volume. It doesn't have to be a lot, but it just probably needs a little bit of crown. Okay, so now that's done. I'm going to strike a curve from here again to here, somewhere over here. I think I'm just going to go straight to a square. So I'm just going to push it like that. I think that's good. All right, so I got a bunch of curves, so I'm just going to hide them. So let's, well, I don't need this one anymore. So, well, let's just hide it over here. I think. What are these curves? All right, so I'm just going to put that over there. This one I'm going to leave. Okay, so that's a little bit more organized. Let's hide that one. Okay, so that looks good. Got some projection curves over there. Okay, so now let's go ahead and build a square. So it's going to be 1, 2, 3, and 4. Oh, actually, yeah, I do need a curve over here. So I'm just going to duplicate this curve over here like this. And let's just go ahead and extend it back so that again I can do a nice fade of the wheel flat. So I'm just going to snap it over here like this. And that's going to make a gradual change over here. And this one, I'm going to hide for a second so that I can snap this curve over here like that. Okay, so that looks, that's looking pretty good. So I'm just going to do a square. So it's going to 1, 2, 3, and 4. And degree 5 does it. Let's see if I can reduce it. No, it's failing position. So I'll just have to keep it that way. All right, so same thing over here. It's going to 1, 2, 3. Oh, actually this curve, because I changed the wheel flat curve, I do need to re-snap this one. So let's go ahead and do that. And again, it's going to be a square. So it's going to be 1, 2, 3, and 4. And that's looking good as well. Now, like I did on the front, I do want to change the volume of this a little bit. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm just going to try, well, let's see if I can do, oh, I don't know why Boundary Blend doesn't let me do this, but it's giving me an extra rows of CVs. So let's go ahead and just do it manually. Okay, so I do think that this is relatively flat, so I'm just going to leave it there, which means I do have to manually adjust these CVs over here. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm just going to do NUV. Just going to make it a little bit flatter over here. Now you don't want to make it negative, but you do want it to be a little bit flat. So I'm just going to do that. And let's see if I can play around with this one. I do think that this one has still a little bit of volume that I can push in. So let's do that. As long as it's on negative, I think I should be good. And I think that gets me actually pretty close. However, I'm starting to think that it might be a little bit negative. So I'm just going to push it this way. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop this curve out. However, it's not aligned because it's the top one, I delete the history. So I'm just going to do this. I'm going to turn blending off over here. Like this. I think the volume over here is at the minimum. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to push this out in UV. And let's see if I can get a little bit flatter. And I think that's actually pretty good. All right. So there's a little difference, but that's okay. I'm going to be using fillet anyways. Actually, if you want to, you could probably, with such a subtle difference between the two, as you can see over here, it's 0.1 degree off, which is really close. Now that said, however, I don't think I can achieve curvature just with this unless I do add more spans. So what I'm going to do is I'm probably just going to make it simple and put a fillet between the two. But as far as the overall shape goes, yeah, it's not bad. Okay, so highlight's not too bad. So now let's go ahead and do the wheel flat over here. So let's go ahead and I'm just going to, oh, actually, I'm going to make everything visible over here. I'm just going to duplicate the curve. And again, it's the same procedure. Oops, I don't need this one, so I'm going to hide it. I'm going to extend it back like that. And all I need to do is just skim between it because I believe this position is still the same. So let's grab skin like that. And there's your new wheel flat. Of course, you don't need the curves anymore, so you can hide it. And I'm just going to go ahead and delete the construction history on this one. All right, so that's looking pretty good, nice and flat. So yeah, so now what I need to do is I need to put a fillet between the two. I need to do some trimming. However, I think this is going to take a little bit more time. So I'm going to also split this into two parts. So well, we'll continue in the next one.